They say I am the villain for walking away. Her mother calls me cruel. Her brother threatened to find me and make me answer for what I did. Her friends flood my old social media with messages saying I abandoned someone who needed me most. But here is what none of them know. I caught my wife in bed with my business partner on our 5th wedding anniversary. I did not yell, did not cry, did not make a scene. I just packed a bag, withdrew half our savings, and vanished without a single word. Now they want to paint me as the monster because she had a breakdown. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe, because what really happened that night will change how you see everything. I met Amanda 7 years ago at a networking event in Austin, Texas. I was 28, running a small but growing digital marketing agency. She was 26, working as a graphic designer for a tech startup. We connected over terrible conference coffee and complaints about boring keynote speakers. She had this energy about her that drew people in. Confident creative, always the center of attention in the best way possible. We started dating within a week. 6 months later, we moved in together to a loft apartment downtown. She quit her job to freelance, said she wanted more freedom to pursue her own creative projects. I supported her completely. My business was doing well enough to cover both of us while she built her client base. I thought we were building something together. 2 years into our relationship, I proposed. Nothing fancy, just the two of us on a weekend trip to Big Bend National Park. We got married at a small venue in the hill country, invited about 50 people, kept it casual and fun. Her family loved me back then. Her dad kept saying I was the best thing that ever happened to his daughter. Her mom hugged me at the reception and said she finally stopped worrying about Amanda's future. After the wedding, Amanda's freelance work started taking off. She landed a few major clients, started making decent money. I was proud of her. Around that same time, I brought on a partner to help grow my agency. His name was Kyle. He was 32, recently divorced, had a solid track record in the industry. We met through mutual connections and hit it off immediately. He brought in new clients, handled the sales side while I focused on strategy and operations. The business doubled in size within a year. Kyle became more than a business partner. He became a friend. We grabbed lunch together, went to basketball games. He came over for dinner at our place regularly. Amanda seemed to like him well enough. She would chat with him about design work, sometimes asked his opinion on her projects. I thought it was great that my wife and my business partner got along. I thought we were all building this successful, happy life together. But somewhere along the way, things I should have noticed started happening. Amanda began dressing up more when she knew Kyle was coming over. She would laugh louder at his jokes, touch his arm when they talked. She started going to the gym more often, bought new clothes, changed her hair. I thought she was just feeling good about herself, about her career success. I had no idea she was preparing to betray me. The arguments started about 4 months before everything exploded. Small things, at first. She complained I worked too much, said I was never present even when I was home, accused me of caring more about the business than our marriage. I tried to make changes, took her out on date nights, planned a long weekend trip to New Orleans. But nothing seemed to fix the growing distance between us. She started staying out late with friends. Girls' nights that stretched until 2 or 3 in the morning. I did not question it, because I trusted her. She started being vague about her schedule, saying she had client meetings that I later found out never existed. Her phone was suddenly always face down, password protected when it never had been before. I told myself I was being paranoid. that the stress of growing the business was making me imagine problems that were not there. But deep down, some part of me knew. I just did not want to face it. Our 5th anniversary fell on a Saturday in June. I had the whole day planned. Brunch at her favorite spot, a couple's massage dinner at the restaurant where we had our first date, then back home where I had rose petals and champagne waiting. Except none of that happened. I left the office early that Friday around 3 p.m. to pick up her anniversary gift. A custom illustration she had mentioned wanting months ago, something I had commissioned from an artist she admired. I was excited to surprise her. I pulled into our driveway around 3:30 and noticed Kyle's car parked on the street. Weird, I thought. We did not have any meetings scheduled, and he rarely came by the house during work hours. I walked in through the front door. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I called out for Amanda. No response. I set the gift down on the entry table and walked toward the bedroom. That is when I heard it. Sounds I will never forget. Sounds that confirmed every fear I had been pushing down for months. I opened the bedroom door. They did not even notice at first. My wife and my business partner in our bed on our anniversary. When Amanda finally saw me standing there, she screamed, tried to cover herself, started saying my name over and over. Kyle jumped up, started trying to explain. I just stood there completely calm, watching them scramble. I did not yell, did not throw things, did not demand explanations. I just looked at Amanda and said 4 words. I am done here. Then I turned around and walked out. Behind me I heard Amanda crying, calling my name, begging me to wait. Kyle trying to apologize. I ignored both of them, went to our home office, grabbed my laptop and the external drive with all my personal files, walked to our bedroom closet while they were still getting dressed, and threw clothes into a duffel bag. Amanda was blocking the bedroom door, crying hysterically, saying it was a mistake. It only happened a few times. She loved me. We could work through this. I moved past her without a word. Kyle was in the living room shirt, half-buttoned, saying he was sorry he never meant for it to happen. I walked past him, too. I threw my bag in my car, drove to the bank, withdrew $50,000 from our joint savings account. Exactly half. Then I drove to a hotel, checked in, and started planning my exit. I did not answer Amanda's calls, did not respond to her texts, did not read Kyle's emails. I was done. Over the next 3 days, I worked fast. I contacted a lawyer, filed for divorce, had Amanda served at our house. I went to the business, called an emergency meeting with our other employees, explained that Kyle was being bought out effective immediately due to breach of partnership agreement. I had built the company before he came along. My name was on everything, and our contract had a morality clause. Sleeping with my wife qualified. He was out. Kyle tried to fight it, threatened legal action. But my lawyer shut that down fast. He could either take the buyout offer or face a lawsuit that would destroy his reputation in the industry. He took the money and disappeared. Last I heard, he moved to California. I moved my stuff out of the house while Amanda was at her mother's place. Did not take anything that was not clearly mine. Left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter. Changed my phone number. Blocked her on every platform. I did not want to hear her excuses or her apologies. There was nothing she could say that would change what I saw. The divorce papers included a clean split. She got the house, I kept the business. No alimony since we both worked and the marriage was short. I wanted it done fast and final. My lawyer said most divorces drag on for months, but this one was wrapped up in 6 weeks because I did not fight about anything. I just wanted out. During those 6 weeks, I stayed completely silent. Did not tell anyone except my lawyer what happened. Did not post on social media. Did not respond to messages from mutual friends asking if Amanda and I were okay. I just went to work, went to the gym, went back to my hotel room. I was functioning but barely feeling anything. The betrayal had hollowed me out. Then the messages from her family started. First from her mother, asking me to call her, saying Amanda was struggling, that I needed to talk to her. I ignored it. Then from her brother, more aggressive, saying I was a coward for not facing what happened like a man. Still ignored. Then from her friends, all saying the same thing, that Amanda was falling apart, that she was not eating, not sleeping, that she had quit taking freelance projects, and was just sitting in that house alone, crying. I did not care. She made her choice. She lived with the consequences. That was not cruel. That was consequences. But then her mother showed up at my office. She walked right past the receptionist, barged into my office while I was in a meeting with a client. I had to excuse myself and deal with her in the hallway. She was crying, begging me to talk to Amanda, saying her daughter was having a complete breakdown, that she had lost 15 pounds in a month, that she was seeing a therapist, but it was not helping, that she needed closure. I told her mother the same thing I am telling you now. Amanda made her choice when she slept with my business partner. She knew exactly what she was doing. She does not get to fall apart now and expect me to put her back together. Her mother called me heartless, said I was punishing Amanda beyond what the situation deserved, that everyone makes mistakes, that I was destroying someone I claimed to love. I looked her mother right in the eye and said, Amanda destroyed this marriage the moment she brought another man into our bed. I did not do this to her. She did this to herself. Then I walked back into my office and had security escort her mother out of the building. The attacks escalated after that. Her brother started posting on social media, not naming me directly, but clearly talking about me. Posting about men who abandon their wives during mental health crises. About how real men work through problems instead of running away. His friends started commenting, agreeing, saying whoever he was talking about was trash. I did not respond, did not engage. Let them paint their narrative. Amanda's friends were worse. They sent me long messages detailing how badly Amanda was doing, how she was not the same person anymore, how she had panic attacks, how she could not sleep without medication, how she told them she understood why I left, but that the silence was killing her more than anything, that she just needed to talk to me once, to apologize properly, to get some kind of closure so she could start healing. One of her friends even showed up at my gym, cornered me in the parking lot after a workout, told me I was being cruel, that whatever Amanda did, I was making it worse by ghosting her completely, that I was contributing to her mental breakdown by refusing any contact. I told her friend that Amanda's mental health was not my responsibility anymore, that she should have thought about consequences before she made her choices. Her friend called me a selfish bastard and walked away. 3 months after I left, I was rebuilding my life. I moved into a new apartment across town, smaller but modern and all mine. I threw myself into the business, working 12-hour days, landing new clients, expanding into new markets. Work was the only thing that made sense, the only place where I had control. I started seeing someone casually, Nothing serious, just someone I met at a coffee shop who knew nothing about my past. We went on dates, kept things light. It felt good to be around someone who did not carry the weight of betrayal. Then one night around 11 p.m., my doorbell rang. I was not expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and saw Amanda standing there. She looked terrible. Thin, pale eyes, red and swollen like she had been crying for hours. My first instinct was to not open the door. But something made me hesitate. She rang the bell again. Then she started talking through the door, saying she knew I did not want to see her, but she was begging me for just 5 minutes. That she needed to say something to my face. That she would leave right after and never bother me again. Her voice was shaking, desperate. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. We stood there staring at each other. She looked even worse up close. She had lost weight. Her clothes hung off her frame. She had dark circles under her eyes. She looked like someone who had not slept properly in months. She did not come inside, just stood in the hallway and started talking. She apologized, said she knew it did not fix anything, but she needed to say it anyway. That what she did was unforgivable. That she destroyed the best thing in her life because she was selfish and stupid. That she had been going to therapy trying to understand why she sabotaged everything. That she did not expect me to forgive her, but she needed me to know how sorry she was. I listened without saying anything. When she finished, there was this long silence. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. Why did I disappear completely? Why did I not yell at her, fight with her, give her a chance to explain? Why did I just vanish, like she meant nothing? I looked at her and said, because she did not deserve my anger. She did not deserve my pain. She did not deserve any part of me after what she did. The only power I had left was to remove myself completely. And that is exactly what I did. She started crying harder then. Said the silence was worse than anything I could have said or done. That not knowing what I was thinking or feeling was torture. That she would have preferred me screaming at her, hating her out loud, anything but the complete absence of me. I told her that was not my problem. That she created this situation and now she had to live with it. That I did not owe her closure or comfort or anything else. Then I closed the door. I heard her sobbing in the hallway for a few minutes before she finally left. The next day, her mother called me from a number I did not have blocked. She was furious. Said Amanda had come to her house after leaving mine, that she was in crisis, that I had pushed her to the edge by being so cold. She said Amanda's therapist was concerned. That the lack of any resolution with me was preventing Amanda from moving forward. That I needed to at least have one real conversation with her so she could start to heal. I told her mother the same thing I told Amanda. Her daughter's healing was not my responsibility. That I did not cause her breakdown. Her choices caused her breakdown. And that if she was really concerned about Amanda's mental health, maybe she should focus on getting her daughter better help instead of blaming me for not fixing what I did not break. Her mother hung up on me, but the guilt trips did not stop. Her brother sent me an email saying that whatever Amanda did, my response was disproportionate. That completely cutting someone off without any communication was psychological abuse. That I was damaging her worse than the divorce itself. That real men take responsibility for the impact of their actions. I wrote back one line. Real men do not sleep with their business partners' wives. Then I blocked him, too. Amanda's friends organized some kind of intervention. They reached out to my friends, people we knew as a couple, trying to convince them to talk to me, saying I was being unreasonable, that everyone deserves a chance to make amends, that my silence was cruel and unusual punishment. A few people I thought were my friends actually agreed with them, said maybe I was taking it too far, that Amanda had suffered enough. I cut those people off too. Anyone who thought I owed my cheating ex-wife anything did not deserve space in my life. I was done apologizing for protecting myself, done feeling guilty for refusing to be someone's emotional support after they destroyed me. 6 months after everything, I was in a better place. The business was thriving. I had moved on emotionally, started dating someone new, someone who actually respected me. I rarely thought about Amanda anymore. When I did, it was with indifference rather than pain. I had healed by removing the source of my hurt completely. Then I got a call from a number I did not recognize. I almost did not answer, but something told me to pick up. It was Amanda's therapist. She introduced herself, said Amanda had given her permission to reach out. She wanted to talk to me about Amanda's treatment. I was annoyed, but I listened. The therapist explained that Amanda was diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety following our divorce, that she had been hospitalized briefly a few months back after a particularly bad episode. That part of her healing process involved making amends with people she had hurt, and that Amanda's inability to have any kind of resolution with me was a major barrier to her recovery. The therapist asked if I would be willing to attend one session. Just one. For Amanda to say what she needed to say in a controlled environment. The therapist assured me I would not have to respond or engage beyond listening, that it was about giving Amanda a chance to take accountability in a way that might help her move forward. I said no. I told the therapist that I understood she was trying to help her patient, but that I was not obligated to participate in Amanda's healing process, that I had my own healing to do, and it required staying far away from her. The therapist said she understood but asked me to think about it. I said I would. I did not. 2 weeks later, Amanda's brother showed up at my apartment. This time he was not angry. He was pleading. He told me Amanda had attempted suicide 3 days prior, that she had taken a bottle of pills and her roommate found her in time, that she was in the hospital stable but broken, that the doctor said she needed support from the people in her life. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, I did not have to forgive her or get back together or anything like that. But could I please just visit her once, let her see that I did not hate her, give her something to hold on to so she could start rebuilding. He said their family was desperate, that they did not know what else to do. I felt something twist in my chest, hearing that. Not guilt, exactly, but something uncomfortable. I asked him if he really thought me showing up would help, or if it would just make things worse. He said he did not know, but they were willing to try anything. I thought about it for 2 days. Finally, I agreed to visit. Once. Just to see if it would actually help, or if this was just more manipulation. I went to the hospital on a Wednesday afternoon. Her brother met me in the lobby, thanked me repeatedly for coming. He walked me to her room. Amanda was sitting up in bed looking even thinner than the last time I saw her. When she saw me walk, in her eyes filled with tears. Her brother left us alone. I stood near the door, keeping distance between us. She did not ask me to sit down. She just started talking. She told me everything. How the affair with Kyle started. How it was not about him at all, but about her own insecurities. How she felt like she was losing herself in our marriage, felt invisible, and Kyle's attention made her feel seen again. How she knew it was wrong, but convinced herself it was filling some need I was not meeting. She said that after I left, she had to face the reality that she destroyed something real for something meaningless. That Kyle had not actually cared about her, just wanted what he could not have. That the moment things got messy, he disappeared too. That she lost her husband, her marriage, her stability, all for someone who was never going to choose her anyway. She apologized again, said she understood why I left the way I did, that she probably would have done the same thing, but that the silence, the complete absence of me, made her feel like she had never mattered at all, like our entire marriage was erased the moment I walked out that door. I listened to all of it. When she finished, I finally spoke. I told her she did matter, that our marriage mattered. That is exactly why her betrayal cut so deep. I did not ghost her because she meant nothing. I ghosted her because she meant everything, and she destroyed that. Walking away completely was the only way I knew how to protect what was left of myself. I told her I was sorry she was suffering, that I never wanted her to hurt herself, but that I could not be the person who helped her heal, that she needed to find that strength in herself, in therapy, in her family. Not in me. I had nothing left to give her. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. She thanked me for coming, said it helped more than I knew just to hear my voice, to know I did not hate her. I told her I did not hate her. I just could not have her in my life anymore. Then I left. Her brother walked me out. He thanked me again, said it meant the world to Amanda that I came. I told him to take care of his sister, that she needed professional help and family support, but that this was the last time. I could not keep being pulled back into her crisis. He understood. We shook hands, and I walked away. I've not seen or heard from any of them since. That was 8 months ago. It has been over a year now since I walked out of that bedroom. A year since I chose to protect myself by disappearing completely. People still have opinions about how I handled it. Some think I did the right thing. Others think I was cruel. Her family will probably always see me as the villain in their daughter's story. But here is what I know. I did not cause Amanda's breakdown. Her choices caused it. Her inability to live with the consequences of those choices caused it. I refused to set myself on fire to keep her warm, and somehow that made me the bad guy. But I am okay with that. I learned something important through all of this. You do not owe people who hurt you your pain. You do not owe them your anger. You do not owe them closure or forgiveness or participation in their healing. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is simply walk away and never look back. Amanda wanted me to yell, to fight, to give her something to work with. But I refused to give her that power over me. I took away the only thing I had control over, my presence, my energy, my emotional investment. And yes, that hurt her. But staying would have destroyed me. I'm in a good place now. The business is better than ever. I'm in a healthy relationship with someone who values honesty and loyalty. I sleep well at night, knowing I made the right choice for myself. I do not feel guilty anymore for choosing my own peace over someone else's comfort. Would I do anything differently? Maybe I would have said something that day instead of just walking out. Maybe one conversation would have prevented some of the fallout. But honestly, I do not think so. Amanda did not need my words. She needed to face what she did without me there to soften the blow. And as hard as that was for her, it was necessary. Her family can call me a monster all they want. I know the truth. I know I gave that marriage everything I had. I know I was faithful, supportive, present. I know I did not deserve what she did. And I know I had every right to leave the way I did. No explanations, no second chances, no looking back. If you are going through something similar, if someone betrayed you, and now they or their family are trying to guilt you into sticking around, hear me clearly. You do not owe anyone your suffering. You do not have to manage someone else's guilt or breakdown or healing process. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to choose silence over engagement. And anyone who tells you otherwise does not have your best interests at heart. Some people will say love means fighting through anything. But real self-love means knowing when to walk away from people who do not value you. I chose myself. And I would make that choice again every single time. So to Amanda's family, if any of you ever see this, I am sorry your daughter is struggling. I truly am. But I am not sorry for leaving. I am not sorry for the silence. And I am not sorry for choosing my own mental health over hers. She made her choice. I made mine. We both have to live with the consequences. Have you ever been called the villain for protecting yourself after someone betrayed you? Would you have handled this differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that it is okay to walk away. Subscribe for more real stories about boundaries, betrayal, and choosing yourself. Thank you for watching. Thank you for understanding that sometimes walking away is not cruelty, it is survival. Take care of yourselves, and remember you do not owe anyone access to you, especially people who proved they do not deserve it. Stay strong out there.